Folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Well, there's a little bit of storm activity going on throughout the Midwest and the South today, so be watching for that. And I know many of you have already experienced this storm. It looks like it's mostly high winds, but there's certainly a chance of tornadic activity. Some of you may have already experienced that, but it looks like it's going to go throughout the evening, so be prepared for that. Rain looks to be falling with it, and so I know that most all the areas, because I looked this morning, pretty much every area that's expected to receive some rain is in desperate need of it. So hopefully the damage won't be too bad, and then we can just suffer through the wind and enjoy the rain afterwards, because I know a lot of you desperately need it. I also wanted to mention that I sent out my monthly newsletter today. And so be checking for that. Check your spam folder, because a lot of times it gets dumped into the spam folder. This is a newsletter that any of you can sign up for. It's totally free. I don't try to sell you anything, because it's not a newsletter about me. It's a newsletter about what we're doing here locally. In fact, I almost never even mention this channel or any activity that I'm doing here on this channel. It's about our local group, our local meetings. And so that's the primary focus, but I do open it up for anyone. There's no, secrets and details being talked about in there, but there are occasionally, we try to put some articles from our local group, people that write the articles and contribute, so there's some good information in there also. But be looking for that in your spam folders. Want to get into some news today, and we're all over the board. We're not going to focus on any one particular subject. We're everywhere, because there's just a lot of stuff happening. The markets seem to be rallying today, but most importantly is the commodities markets. The silver and the gold are going up. We'll see if this trend stays. At some point, most of us understand that silver, especially silver, but both silver and gold, they're being held back. Their value's being held back. We've watched all year long of tons, literally tons and tons of gold and silver being purchased, and yet the value of both has gone up only incrementally. And so we know pretty much for a fact that it's being held back, and at some point it's believed that it's going to let loose. And they are going to let it loose, and we're going to see both of them skyrocket. And that, while in some ways is a good thing, but in a lot of ways it's going to kind of be the end of the US dollar when that happens. But we're going to get on with this. This one here, I think it's kind of important. Could possibly be leading to some end time prophecies being fulfilled, but who knows? Russia is now threatening Israel. That's correct. Russia has said that it will retaliate if Israel supplies defense aid to Ukraine. Now, the backstory on this is, and many of you already know this, that Israel has tried to play a neutral part in the whole Ukraine-Russia ordeal. They just didn't want to get involved in it, and so they've tried to play neutral and even have at times seemed to be trying to help negotiate some kind of agreements between the two parties. But things are starting to change, and the reason is because Iran is involved. Iran is supplying Russia with quite a bit of arms right now, especially the drones and a few other things. And so they have become much more involved. In fact, there's been reports that Iranian troops have been in Russia and maybe even Ukraine in the areas that Russia control, helping, assisting, training Russians to use their equipment. And so that is kind of softening Israel up to the idea of helping Ukraine. And so Russia is letting them know, if you decide to help Ukraine, we will retaliate against you. And of course, many of you, the first thing that comes to mind is the prophecy of Gog and Magog in the Bible. That may not be what this is referencing to, but it could possibly be setting the stage for that to happen in the near future, because we just don't know when things like this happen, how they're going to, lead down the road. UN nuclear watchdog group calls Putin's bluff no evidence of dirty bomb. So they went in, remember, a week or so ago, Putin was saying that Ukraine had a dirty bomb and they were going to use it on Russia. And so they called in the United Nations nuclear watchdog team, and they inspected sites, and they have said that there is no evidence whatsoever, okay? Do we take it on face value that Russia, you know, it was a bluff, that they just made a mistake, and that the United Nations went in there and actually did an accurate job and deemed it clean? Or is the United Nations full of baloney? Or did Russia do this as some sort of distraction to setting the stage further down the road that benefits themselves? Because I do find it a little unusual that Russia would go to the extent that they did of making such an international incident and drawing attention in this area, even to the point of going to the United Nations and requesting these UN inspectors to go into Ukraine, when it was based on really bad intelligence. That could be it. It could be bad intelligence. It could be them just trying to get attention. I don't know. It just seems a little strange to me, and I kind of suspect that there's something else involved here that we are not hearing, which is typically the case, okay? I mean, we all pretty much know that by now, right? Well, here's something that it just should excite all of you, okay? Guess what? The U.S. government is spending more money. Yes, that's right. We are sending in now another $400 million in additional security and weapons, the Pentagon announced, to Ukraine. I'd have lost track at this point of how much we've sent over there. It's several billions of dollars, and it doesn't look like there's any end in sight in that. So we're sending another $400 million in arms over to Ukraine. We're becoming such a big arms dealer for this war, and just about every time we send stuff over, it probably is including a certain amount of troops to go over to take care of it, to inspect it, and to teach them how to use our weapons, which is what we've been hearing about also. The whole North and South Korea thing, it's still getting hot. I mean, it's still hot and it's still getting hotter. Overnight, North Korea fired several artillery shells towards South Korea. They aren't hitting in South Korea. Most of these are landing in the waters, but they're definitely in the direction of South Korea, and they, you know, imply a threat. Okay, that's as best as we can say. South Korea claims that they had to scramble dozens of military aircraft because they had spotted over 180 North Korean warplanes flying towards South Korea. Now, of course, nothing happened because of this, but we're just seeing almost on a daily basis now of escalation after escalation. When this kind of stuff happens, even if it's all planned out, even in the back rooms, North and South Korea are sitting there on the phone and say, okay, now you do this, and then we'll do this, and then you do this, and then we'll do this. Even if that's happening, and we have no evidence that that is happening, the chances of something going wrong, the chances of something slipping up, the chances of something bad happening increase greatly every time this happens. There's a chart, I think I've got a chart here showing the amount of missiles that North Korea has launched, at least in a line graph, since the ending, or the pausing, let's call it that, the pausing of the Korean conflict, Korean War. And as you can see, in the last year, they have launched far more of them than any other time period, possibly even the entire past history combined. We're talking a lot. So the escalation between North and South Korea is rapidly increasing, and it's, you know, we've pledged our assistance, we've pledged our military to South Korea. So it's almost like North Korea, under the direction probably of China and Russia, are trying to poke us into some kind of a conflict, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Switching gears here, Thanksgiving, food shortages are going to impact it. You need to be ready for that. Thanksgiving and any holiday that you choose to celebrate in the next coming weeks, it's probably going to be a lot harder to get certain items. For instance, poultry, chicken, and turkey are going to be the two harder things to get, and you're going to pay more for them because of the millions and millions of poultry that have been killed this year. In fact, there was some just a few days ago in Iowa, a farm that they killed off a bunch more, and so it's caused a price increase, which is, you know, that's a given. But then there's just other items that they're warning. It's going to be a little tougher this year to do your shopping. You should probably start doing it now if you're able to. because if you wait until the normal time, a few days ahead of, before Thanksgiving, you may find out that the stuff just isn't available. And then of course, you also have to factor in that the more that they talk about this in this way, the more that even I talk about this, anyone talks about this, it's going to cause people to do exactly what they're telling them to do, which is go out and buy early. So if you wait till late, there's a good chance it's not going to be there. Labor Secretary is warning that if an agreement is not met between the rail workers and the rail companies, that Congress has to take action, because this is going to be devastating. We've been talking about this off and on for the last couple of months, and the rail workers, they just do not want to sign on to any deal, and they're dead set on striking. Here's another article. It's going to be a logistic nightmare. So there's 2 rail unions so far that have said we are not accepting any of this. We're just not going to do it. That doesn't mean that every rail line and every rail worker will go on strike, but even if just those 2 go on strike, it's certainly enough to cause massive havoc and slowdown in the system. And the rail companies, I mean, that's where the bulk of everything in this country that's used either travels on it or is supported by a product that travels on it. So if it's only being moved around by a semi, well, it's very possible the parts that keep the semi running or the fuel that keeps the semi running is transported on trains. So this is going to be epic. I mean, I've said before, this whole rail worker strike, if it ends up happening, it could be one of the biggest things that happens in a very long time. I mean, it could be nearly as devastating, if not equally and more devastating, at least in the short term, as entering into World War III. So, those of you that are worried about World War III or something like that, you should also be concerned with this, because this is massively huge if they end up going to strike. Speaking of strikes, Delta airline pilots have authorized union leaders to call a strike. Out of 96% of the pilots voted in favor of it, and they said to the union workers, to the union leaders, to go forward with the strike. So unless something is negotiated soon, that's where it looks like. And again, probably not as devastating, well, certainly not as devastating as the rail strike, but this would certainly cause great harm to our economy to have, I believe it's 15,000 airline pilots that go on strike. This would be pretty bad, and we would see a lot of things happen that would damage the economy and the supply chains and everything. So it's just more of the same thing piling up. I mean, that big old pile of doo-doo is getting bigger and bigger, folks. That's why we keep preparing. That's why we keep getting ready. Europe, they're warning all these experts and stuff. They're warning Europe that they need to take action now to get prepared for next winter, not just this winter, next winter, because it's going to be worse. They're saying that as bad as it is right now, and we've been hearing all sorts of stories all over Europe of how bad it is when it comes to energy costs and the availability of energy, fuels that keep vehicles going and that keeps the lights on and keeps the houses warm. And we've been seeing some pretty tragic stories. All over France, I've seen videos of them pushing police cars and ambulances because they continually run out of gas because there's hardly any available. Numerous businesses all over Europe have shut down because they can't afford to keep the lights on. They're expecting thousands of deaths this winter just from people freezing to death because there's not enough heat to keep them warm. And yet these experts are saying, yeah, next winter, it's going to be a lot worse. Everything that they look at, it's showing that it's going to get worse. And so this is the direction that we're headed. Now, I will admit, because I know many of you are going to immediately jump in and say, yes, this is all being orchestrated because it's all part of this great reset plan that you talk about all the time. You're right, it is. Are some of these things that are happening natural things that could have been averted? Probably, maybe. I don't know. I'd admit to at least somewhat some of them. But the vast majority of this, I firmly believe, is all following the plan of the Great Reset, of this, green utopian future that they're trying to create. And so they're trying to cut, and just like here in America, like there's absolutely no logical reason that we're paying in some places over $5 a gallon for gasoline. The gasoline the fuel costs have gone up. I think maybe it's over $4 a gallon, $5 a gallon, depending on what you're putting in your tank. There's no reason for that whatsoever, because we have plenty of it. There's plenty to pump, but it's all being controlled and orchestrated, and then of course turn around and blame shifting the oil companies, or blame shifting even you and I for driving the wrong kind of vehicle. This is all being orchestrated, and it's coming our way. In fact, so much so that Time magazine is saying that you think it's bad this year, just wait till next winter, because it's going to be epically bad. And that's what I've been saying. That's what myself and many others have been saying, that as bad as this year has been, next year's going to be worse, folks. Absolutely worse. And that's assuming that nothing, I say that confidently, assuming that if nothing got any worse than it is now, if by next, summer, next fall, next winter, we're still not at World War III, there still hasn't been nuclear war, there wasn't some type of railroad strike or other black swan event, I still firmly believe that everything's going to be significantly worse than it has been this past year. And this past year was a big eye-opener for a lot of folks. All this stuff, even the ones that call themselves preppers, they kind of were awakened by, like, wow, things really can get bad. They really are getting bad. And they will continue to get worse. This isn't just my words. This is a vast amount of experts all across the board have been warning for weeks and months now that 2023 is going to be way worse than 2022. It's not going to get any better. And we don't know what other events will happen that we're not even aware of right now that will just exacerbate the whole situation. So folks, it's absolutely time to get yourselves prepared. Stock up, prep up, pray up, train up, and get your houses in order. Prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually, folks. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.